What's up, everybody? So this is going to be a video slightly different than usual. Sorry if the lighting's not the greatest or the audio is going to kind of suck here or there. Basically made some home theater upgrades, and I kind of want to document it and go through what I'm doing here. So long story short, a good friend of mine, Taurus, from the Fun Waste of Time podcast, made some significant upgrades to his theater. He was rocking a Denon X6300H and is now upgraded to an Anthem AVM70, and he cut me a pretty darn sweet deal on the Denon X6300H, around 500 bucks. I could not say no. Now I know it's, a few generations old at this point. I think it's maybe 2016, 2017. It was their top of the line receiver at that time. It has 11 channels of processing. 11? Yeah. So it does 7 ear level bed channel speakers and then 4 height speakers. So major upgrade over the 5 bed channel ear level speakers that I can currently do and just 2 height speakers. Now the 6300H does not do HDMI 2.1. It doesn't have direct live or anything like that. And honestly, HDMI 2.1 features aren't really a deal breaker for me anymore. I got an HDMI eARC extractor a few months ago, and that's kind of solved my audio issues with not having HDMI 2.1 in a receiver. So that's covered. And then Dirac, not really a deal breaker for me. I honestly ended up following a guide from another channel called Obsessive Compulsive Audiophile, where he basically ran through or did a tutorial on doing a full manual calibration using the graphic equalizer and a Denon or Marantz, and the results were honestly better than I've ever gotten with any room correction, including Dirac. So if you guys are interested in a tutorial on this channel about that, let me know. I could totally put the Brad Home Theater Gamer spin on it and do a tutorial series on that, because it's pretty transformative actually. So anyway, this video is really just going to be bringing you along for what I'm doing here in terms of upgrades. So right now I'm running top middle height speakers. They're the Aperion Audio Clear 6Cs. I'll actually have a review video out on those really soon. I'm actually moving those top middle speakers up to top front, and then I'm installing some Polk VT60s for the top rear for now. I know you want the same speakers technically for Dolby Atmos. You want them to match from the top fronts and the top rears. But for now, they're just kind of placeholders until I can get another pair of Clear 6Cs. Basically, I've already ran all the cables and everything when I did this home theater build back in June, July of 2022. I put in a lot of the legwork already. I put the drop ceiling in for the sole purpose of having ease of access to install new speakers or move things around for eventual upgrades just like this. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how it ends up working out in that regard, because I'm hoping my hard work initially will pay off. But it's going to be a pretty long day, and that's okay. I really enjoy this stuff, and I just want to bring you along for the ride, so hopefully you'll stick around. Yeah, let's get started. So I started on the right side of the room, and like I said, all I had to do was take the top middle height speaker and move it up one in the grid, and that would get me at the 55-degree angle that was optimum for that speaker. And then I just installed the Polk VT60 in the rear at a 120-degree angle, and that worked out perfectly. Now, right in the middle, I have some acoustic panels that I made and I went over in my build series videos, and they are right above the main listening position and really help cut down on some of those first reflection points. And then I just repeated the whole thing on the left side. Now, I did wire for a total of 6 height speakers, but in reality, I'll only ever use 4 because the size of the room. It being as small as it is, basically means that a total of 6 speakers just wouldn't make sense. It would probably sound worse than just 4. All right, well, the receiver finally showed up last night at around 10 o'clock. It's around 7 a.m. now. So last night I did everything that you guys saw in the video or on the time lapse. I put in the 4 Atmos height speakers, or height speakers, I guess. So those are installed, all wired. I also, you'll notice my AVR is missing here. It's on the ground here. This is the Denon X6300W. So I took that out, but I labeled all of the speaker cables. Hopefully it'll focus so you can kind of see what's going on. It's a mess back here right now, but that is going to get fixed pretty soon. So everything's labeled. So it being a Denon, all of the inputs and everything for the HDMI stuff is the same. So I should just be able to put those in. I also, I marked where the speakers were. so I could just match the angle by putting the speakers back on there. Yeah, I just want to get this thing unboxed and get it in and then get to calibrating finally. So I had intended to record all of me calibrating my system, but then I realized, wait a minute, it's just going to be this, me sitting on the floor going speaker to speaker and you guys not really being able to see anything. So I scrapped it after about half an hour and just went through everything. So I guess now is the perfect time to remove the stickers from the receiver and talk a little bit about how it sounds. That was pretty fucking cool. So all told, the whole process took a couple days. I installed the height speakers on a Thursday. The receiver showed up that night. I installed it on Friday morning, got everything hooked up, and then dived into calibration, which took about 5 to 6 hours total. And then like another hour on Sunday when I did some kind of final tweaks after I watched a bunch of clips and a movie. I'll go ahead and throw up the measurements that I ended up with on screen now. And I'm really honestly impressed with what you can do with just the graphic equalizer in the Denon and Room EQ Wizard. Now I did follow a guide from Obsessive Compulsive Audiophile, which I'll link to his videos that I use in the description below. Definitely go over there if you're interested in going this route. He provides the files and everything you need. Honestly, I've never heard my system sound as good as it does doing this manual calibration. Personal preference, I guess. Sound is subjective, but I would love for you guys to be able to hear this because there's just a cohesiveness to the whole system. Now I didn't need to do any EQ on the subwoofers. I use a mini DSP already. I just measured it to verify the volume, and I do like it a little hot, so it's a little above the target line, which isn't a big deal. I can always bring it back pretty easily. Overall, the system sounds excellent, and I don't think that I'm gonna go back to room correction anytime soon. Now I wanna talk just a bit about going from 2 height speakers in a top middle configuration, so just kind of slightly forward of your listening position, to 4 top front. So we're at a 55-degree angle in the front from our listening position, and then top rears, which are at a 120-degree angle. I couldn't go any further because I would be right up against the back wall. I talked to my friend Steven Smith about that, and he's like, you can actually push those top rears up a little bit. Even 115, 110 wouldn't be awful, but I just chose 120. The biggest difference with having 4 is movement, and I might use that term a lot when describing it because with just 2 speakers, you only have left and right movement. You don't have front to back or back to front or diagonal arcing overhead toward, if you're starting back here behind you on the left, you can't have it go all the way over you and land on the front right speaker. We watched Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and there were so many times where stuff like that happened as the characters, superheroes, were taking flight from the ground. They would jump up and you'd hear them overhead behind you, and then they'd arc over to the right or vice versa, or they go front to back. Like, it was just so cool to kind of hear that movement. And it took me a little while to get used to because it was just so dynamic that I just wasn't used to it. I'm like, this sounds really, really freaking cool. And my wife actually explained it perfectly. When I asked her what she thought of it, she said it sounds more open, more spacious, but precise at the same time. Like, there's a precision to the sound now that you just don't get with having 2 overhead speakers. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that having just 2 height speakers is bad or the worst ever. Honestly, it is what I use for the past 3 to 4 years. And up until now, I never had the budget. I never thought that I would have 4 height speakers anytime soon. And now that I do, it's a world of difference. Upmixing sounds a lot better as well. Again, that spaciousness, that movement, that precision is there. Now, I normally use the DTS Neural X upmixer. I notice more discrete effects being placed, like, in the top front or top left. And that's something that I just never heard before. It was just kind of more of an ambience that I would get with just the 2 height speakers instead of the 4. Again, not that the 2 height speakers were bad, they totally worked, but after hearing 4 in my system in my room, I'm just really floored. Like, I kind of want to go back and watch a bunch of different movies. I have been watching a lot of clips, from A Quiet Place. Goosebumps is a movie that I use a lot. There's the scene when the invisible boy walks on top of the car. And with this, it really sounds like you're in the car with them versus, oh, he's just walking overhead. You can actually hear him walk across the roof and like kind of back and towards the middle. So overall, really, really excited to have this upgrade. And honestly, it just looks cool. Like when you walk in, you see the 4 height speakers. It just looks neat. I don't know. I'm kind of a nerd for this stuff. I don't know if you guys could tell. Now, something I didn't even think about until I was sitting there listening to demos after I did all the calibrations and stuff, were that my speakers sounded more dynamic. And what I mean by that is there was a clarity to them that I'd never heard before. Now this could be placebo, I guess. I don't know, things just hit harder. There was punch, there was heft, even at lower volume levels. Like it just sounds like there's no struggle on the amplifier side. And honestly, I think that comes from the extra power over the 2300W. Now the 2300W had 95 watts of power at 2 channels driven at 8 ohms, whereas the 6300H has 140 watts of power at 2 channels driven at 8 ohms. I think a big thing for me is my ear level speakers, my bed channel, are all Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers at 6, and they're 6 ohm speakers. Now I have the height speakers, they're all 8 ohms. 6 ohm speakers are harder to drive than 8 ohm speakers, and then 4 ohm speakers are like twice as hard to drive as 8 ohm speakers. As you go from 8 ohms, say you want 100 watts to hit a certain volume level, we need 200 watts on a 4 ohm speaker to hit that same volume level that the 8 ohm speaker is hitting at 100 watts. And so 6 ohm is right in the middle. So it needs like 1.5 times the amplifier power to hit the same volume as the 8 ohm speaker at 100 watts. I hope that makes sense. More to the point, the more amplifier power you have, the more headroom you have, the more power you have to draw from. And I think what I was noticing, and what I was actually talking to my friend Taurus about, who I bought the receiver from, with my X2300W, I guess I just didn't notice it at the time, but I was definitely straining those amps when I was listening to movies at like -10 or -12. This was with pretty much the same EQ curve that I used on the X2300W. So there's not a whole lot of variation, same speakers and everything. It doesn't have that strained sound that the X2300W did. And again, that just comes down to having more power to draw from. Now down the road, I would love to upgrade to separate amplifiers and just use the 6300H as a processor. And that's one of the main things that I'm really excited about, honestly. I've never had a receiver or preprocessor with pre-outs before. And so that kind of opens you up to being able to drive harder speakers. There's a lot of 4 ohm speakers out there from like Aperion Audio, Arendal, companies like that, that really honestly need external amplification to sound their best, in my opinion. So it'll be cool to eventually get to a point where I'll be able to check out those types of speakers. Now the Denon X6300H does have Audyssey Multi-EQ XT32. Like I said, I'm kind of done with room correction. Like I don't know that I'll go back to using it, but I think maybe for a video, it would be cool to run XT32, kind of see what it does, how good it is. I don't have Multi-EQ X, which is Audyssey's kind of answer to Dirac Live. That's a $200 upgrade that's tied to the receiver. I'm not sure that I want to go down that road. If I can get a license for that from Audyssey or Denon, then I will definitely check it out. I've been sitting here gushing about how awesome the Denon X6300H is, but it's not all positives. There are a couple of downsides, and honestly, though, they're kind of nitpicking at this point. So like I mentioned in the intro, it doesn't have HDMI 2.1, which I have an eARC extractor for, so that's not really an issue. I'm not really concerned with that. There's no Dirac Live support. Again, not really a deal breaker for me. The Auro 3D upgrade is pricey. It's 200 bucks. You need to have a very specific speaker layout, and it's something I just don't think I'll ever do. I mean, I do have the drop ceiling, so I can rearrange speakers. There's just not a lot of content for Auro 3D. I don't see Auro 3D taking off really. I know a lot of people praise their upmixing, which that's great, but I'm not going to spend $200 on the license for the upgrade and then also have to rearrange my speakers just for the upmixing. So I don't think that's ever gonna happen. But I guess the main thing that I really kind of miss from the X2300W is the web interface. And it's basically a way to control your Denon receiver through your laptop or computer. You just type in the IP address and it allows you full control over everything. For calibration, especially manual calibration, it's a godsend because you don't have to fiddle with the remote. You're not sitting there trying to dial in the graphic equalizer, set a level or set crossovers or set distance. It's all done from your computer. But unfortunately, the 6300H does not
have that support. After Googling it and researching it a bit, it appears that any Denon receiver with the HEOS badge on it does not support this. And I'm not sure why, but it's kind of a bummer. It's not a deal breaker at all, but it does make calibration a bit more difficult because you're having to go into the receiver and change those settings. And it just takes a bit longer than it would if you had a web interface. Now, thankfully, the Denon 2016 remote app on the iPad or iPhone works for some things. I was able to go in and adjust the graphic equalizer based off of, what the numbers I got from ReamyQ Wizard. And that made it a lot easier than having to go in and go band by band and, use the remote to put in, +3, -2, whatever. It was just much easier to kind of use your finger to dial it in there. That's really it. I don't really have any major complaints about it. It's super awesome to have this upgrade that I didn't think I would have right now in 2023. So I am planning to do a home theater tour coming up. I was honestly waiting until I did this to do that. I know some of you guys have requested a home theater tour or an updated home theater tour, I guess. You will get it very soon, so keep a lookout for that. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit that like button and also leave a comment down below if you've gone from 2 overhead height speakers to 4 and what your experience was. I would love to hear from you guys too. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.